Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video today that I thought was very particularly interesting. And this, of course, is going to be on the topic of the possible upcoming Gervonta Tank Davis versus Rolly Romero fight. At least I do believe that that is how you pronounce Mr. Romero's name. Anyways, overall, we're going to review a video today by the boxing channel, of course known as Fannon International Boxing. And Fannon overall, when it comes to his opinion about Gervonta Tank Davis, he has a very similar opinion about Gervonta Tank Davis that I have, which is that Gervonta Tank Davis, in my opinion, he probably is one of the greatest talents overall that I've seen within the past several years in all of boxing. It just is what it is. Now, of course, a certain amount of people they have gotten after Gervonta Tank Davis, they've gotten after him because, of course, he has not really fought the best of competition. And I do have to agree with that. Gervonta Tank Davis, even though I do think that he is an extraordinary talent, I do think that it is finally time for him to get in the ring with some of the big boys. And this next fight that he apparently is allegedly going to be in next, apparently what the WBA ordered. Apparently his next fight is going to be that against Mr. Rolly Romero. And to be honest with you, I don't think that this is a good fight whatsoever. I had a couple of people tell me that they personally think that this is a decent fight. I had one commentator basically tell me yesterday, well, I'm actually somewhat interested in this fight. I would be curious to know overall why certain people would be interested in this fight. On the surface, when I take a look at it, it looks maybe somewhat interesting, at least, to the naked eye, because, of course, both of them have a lot of power. Both Rolly and both Gervonta Tank Davis, they both talk a hot one, especially Rolly Romero. And I'm sure there's going to be a certain amount of people that, just like they did with some of the fighters in the past, whether it be a Paulie Malignaggi or Adrian Broner or Chael Sonnen, fighters I don't know who never were really A-grade fighters, but maybe were able to somewhat come up with a decent career. They're probably going to want to see if Rolly Romero, if he can overall, basically cash in that check that he just wrote for himself. I don't personally think that he has a chance, but it is what it is. Now, a certain amount of people overall may disagree with me. But anyways, Mr. Fannon, he is going to talk about it. I'm going to tune in a little bit as well. And let's tune in.
All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon, and in this video, we're going to talk about the upcoming recently ordered fight between Gervonta Davis and Rolly Romero. And a respected trainer, and other people have been saying that they believe after Gervonta Davis's last fight may be in trouble versus Gervonta Davis may be in trouble against Rolly Romero. Crazy. But let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon. Let's talk about Gervonta Tank Davis and the possibility that he may be in trouble against Rolly Romero in that next fight, and that there is a chance for a big upset brewing. Now, as we all know...
Just an overall pause, Mr. Fannon there. If you're asking me the legitimate chance that I think Rolly Romero has against the Gervonta Tank Davis, at least one that is going to go full force at him, I don't even give Rolly Romero a 10% chance. And a certain amount of people may say, wow, that might be taking it a little bit too far. I don't think it is at all. When I take a look at the best talents at the 135-pound division, I take a look at two people, in my opinion, that are very supremely talented. That when I take a look at their skill sets, I think that they're just out of this world talented. I think one is Mr. Vasyl Lomachenko. Now, of course, some people may say, oh, well, why are you bringing up him for... He lost his last big fight against Teofimo Lopez. Yes, but if you know what you're watching with Mr. Vasyl Lomachenko, the way that he moves, his footwork, his head movement, his athleticism, his power, his speed, even his defensive ability when it comes down to it, Vasyl Lomachenko is an A-grade fighter. Now, at the current moment in time, I do think that Vasyl Lomachenko somewhat needs to get back up on the saddle and somewhat prove himself to be at least, within the top two of the 135-pound division. And I know some people are going to say, oh, well, what are you talking about? He's the number one guy there. He's the best guy there. Well, we'll see about that. Because at the current moment in time, Vasyl Lomachenko does need to prove himself against some of the other bigger guys there. Now, of course, that Teofimo Lopez fight, I think that Teofimo is probably a harder fight for Lomachenko than some of the other guys there. But at the end of the day, it's like this. If Lomachenko, in my opinion, is going to be counted as one of the best two guys there. Now, in terms of talent, in terms of skills, I would completely agree. But in terms of accomplishments and what overall he can do, if you're going to be counted as one of the top two guys in 135, first of all, you have to get a belt. It just is what it is. Now, Gervonta Tank Davis, in terms of accomplishments, I can't really call him overall one of the top two guys there either. But Gervonta Tank Davis, in terms of talent, I have no doubt about it whatsoever. There's two fighters in terms of talent that really stick out to me in terms of that weight division. One is Vasily Lomachenko, and number two is Gervonta Tank Davis. And it just is what it is. If Rolly Romero or Rolly Romero, however you pronounce his name, if this fight were to go down, and if Gervonta Tank Davis were to really take him seriously and not try to coast in this fight, he probably would knock him out within about 3 rounds max. It just is what it is, or minimum, excuse me.
Gervonta Davis and Rolly Romero were supposed to fight earlier this year, or late last year in December. But the fight was canceled because Rolly Romero was accused of some things that have and had the potential of being drawn into court over some charges that are no longer a risk to him. So Rolly Romero, who was the WBA mandatory for Gervonta Davis, remained the WBA mandatory for Gervonta Davis, and now the WBA is saying, now that that situation is all cleared, or rather not, now Rolly Romero was originally the one that pulled out of the fight because of that situation, I'm sure at the request of the PBC. The WBA is now saying, okay, with all of that behind us, and that's not an issue, now we want you to make that fight. When that fight was originally made, myself and most other people treated Rolly Romero like Rolly Romero was a joke going into that fight.
Good, because that's exactly what he should be treated as. It is what it is. And I know a certain amount of people, they're not going to agree with me there when I say that. Listen, dude, at the end of the day, Rolly Romero, he has no chance against Gervonta Tank Davis. He has nothing to get him. He has nothing to beat him with. There's no chance, all in all, that Rolly Romero has against Gervonta Tank Davis. To be honest with you, in my opinion, this is probably the biggest mismatch that I've seen ever since the debatable Manny Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn match, where a lot of people, they were like, where the hell did this dude come from? Now, of course, Jeff Horn, surprisingly, he ended up pulling off the upset, or at least making the fight a hell of a lot more competitive than what most people thought it was going to be. But if I want to compare this to another one, I'm not going to quite compare it to this because Rolly Romero, he at least has a puncher's chance. But for those of you, of course, I remember when Danny Swift Garcia, of course, the multiple-time champion in his career, the two-weight division champion in his career, Danny Swift Garcia fought this one fighter named Rod Sulka at this one point in time where I believe it was right after the Lucas Matisse fight. And, people were like, what the hell, who is this guy? And they were calling it one of the biggest cherry picks overall of the century. And you can somewhat, debate that. I don't really have a problem with that. But at least Danny Swift Garcia, at least he eventually fought the big names, every single big name actually that he needed to. Gervonta Tank Davis is not even facing any of these A-grade fighters. I mean, he fought Leo Santa Cruz. I give you a lot of credit for that. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just like, you know what? After a while, you really got to get in the ring with some of these A-grade fighters. It just is what it is.
And that it was a really bad mismatch.
But in my opinion, what chance do I give Rolly Romero of beating Gervonta Tank Davis? I give him a 5% chance. I give him a 5% chance. If Rolly Romero or Rolly Romero were actually able to defeat Gervonta Tank Davis, it would be the biggest upset that I have personally ever seen in my life in terms of boxing. It is what it is. There's nothing that he has over him. I don't think that he has defense over him. I don't think that he even has punching power over him. He certainly doesn't have boxing ability over him. He certainly doesn't have footwork over him or foot speed. He doesn't have anything over Gervonta Tank Davis. There's nothing that he has. I was reviewing a video by Boxing Eagle the other day, and Mr. Eagle, he was saying, oh, well, but Rolly, he has the height and, he's a little bit bigger. Well, what the hell does that really mean, though? I mean, when we're talking about Gervonta Tank Davis, I mean, we all know that Gervonta Tank Davis, he's a very big boy. It just is what it is. That's like Canelo Alvarez, when it comes down to that's like if you were to face someone like, I mean, shit, even if you want to compare it to that of a Caleb Plant. At the end of the day, Canelo beating Caleb Plant, in my opinion, that was a greater accomplishment certainly than what it is here because Caleb Plant, he actually had some boxing pedigree and he was an undefeated champion. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, did you see Canelo Alvarez get that victory over a guy who was so much more bigger than him? Because we know Canelo Alvarez's skill set. We know that Canelo Alvarez can handle people, all in all, that, that are bigger than him. And Gervonta Tank Davis, it's not like he's facing someone that, is two weight classes bigger. He's facing someone that is pretty much around his own same stature. So what competitiveness does this fight really have? There's no competitiveness in this fight. I just don't see it.
Another cherry pick for Gervonta, or a cherry pick for Gervonta Davis. And really, the only thing worth talking about in the fight was the fact that Rolly Romero was going to be interesting entertainment, that he was going to say and do a lot of things in the lead into the fight.
That's the only way that this fight can sell. There's only two ways that this fight can sell. Well, actually, a couple of ways. First of all, both of them are under the Mayweather promotion, so there's going to be a little bit of a rivalry there. They might be able to try to sell that off at that point when it comes down to it. So they may be able to get more pay-per-view numbers out of this one than what they were able to the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight, because no one really gave a shit or knew who the hell Isaac Pitbull Cruz was. So it just is what it is. But then on top of that, Rolly Romero, he is a person that can put a lot of people's lights out. He is extremely powerful. He can punch really, really hard. So there may be some people that try to say, oh, this is going to be a war, yada, 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 yada. Listen, Gervonta Tank Davis, first of all, I don't think he has any problem coming at Rolly Romero or Rolly Romero because, like I said, Mr. Romero, he's just too sloppy. He swings very wide when it comes down to it. He has no defense whatsoever, no great head movement when it comes down to it. Horrible feet, probably some of the worst feet that I've ever seen in boxing. I mean, it just is what it is. He's really a horrible fighter. Like Canelo Alvarez would say, he's a horrible fighter. Overall, he pretty much, he has no chance overall against Gervonta Tank Davis. It just is what it is.
Talk a lot of smack and get people, interested in the fight that way. He was an entertaining prop for
But another way they can sell it, of course, is not only because of that rivalry, but that Rolly Romero, that he's going to be talking a hot one. I've heard certain people compare Rolly Romero or Rolly Romero to Mr. Ricardo Mayorga. And I understand why, because when you took a look at Ricardo Mayorga, he talked a lot of trash. He played as the heel and kind of the bad guy, and he never was really overtly skilled. But one thing I'll say about Ricardo Mayorga is this. He at least was a champion at one point in time. He was a legitimate champion. He pulled off the biggest upset of the 2000s overall, at least when it comes to the odds makers. And, it probably was the biggest upset when you just take a look at it over Vernon Forrest, I believe. The person that was undefeated at the time and defeated Shea Mosley in 2 matches. Ricardo Mayorga, he went in there, came out of nowhere when it came down to it and knocked him out within about, 2 to 3 rounds, I believe. Then he ended up beating him by unanimous decision, I believe, in the rematch. So Ricardo Mayorga, I can't even compare Rolly Romero to Ricardo Mayorga, because Ricardo Mayorga, I believe, had multiple championships throughout his career. This dude, Rolly, I don't like the dudes that Gervonta Tank Davis is facing, besides the exception of Leo Santa Cruz. I don't even know if any of these guys are legitimately going to win any of the official belts in their career. Maybe Isaac Pitbull Cruz will have a chance. Mario Barrios is never going to win a legitimate belt in his career. He's never going to do that as long as the competition is pretty decently stiff. And neither is Rolly Romero. Rolly Romero, I'm not even sure if he would beat Isaac Pitbull Cruz. It just is what it is.
Otherwise cherry pick for Gervonta Davis. However, according to people now, those things have changed. That situation may have changed because of the last fight that Gervonta Davis had with Isaac Cruz. That fight, which was in December, went the distance for the first. Gervonta Davis went the distance for the first time in a very long time. Actually, was lost several rounds to Isaac Cruz, and certain people, I don't understand why, think that Isaac Cruz beat Gervonta Davis and that Gervonta Davis was the beneficiary of a robbery.
Well, I never watched the fight myself, but if I had to guess, more than likely a lot of people probably tried to overreact to it. Just like a certain amount of these people and a certain amount of these channels, they try to overreact to Canelo Alvarez whenever he may lose a couple rounds. We already heard what Dante's Boxing Nation and a certain amount of these other guys say. Canelo was getting completely outboxed. It's the same shit with Gervonta Tank Davis, because people know that Gervonta Tank Davis, he's an extreme talent. And like I said, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Anyone all know, who is looked at on a higher level, all right, they're basically going to get more haters. It just is what it is. You'll have a lot of people that love you and respect you when it comes down to it, but you're also going to have a lot of people that look at you as a threat, or they're jealous of you. It just is what it is. That's why Gervonta Tank Davis, he's getting so much hate from certain people. That's why Canelo Alvarez is getting so much hate from certain people as well.
Now, I did not see that, but if Gervonta Davis hurts his hand in the same fashion that he did it against Isaac Cruz, against Rolly Romero is a lot bigger puncher than Isaac Cruz.
He's a bigger puncher, but he's not even as skilled as what Isaac Pitbull Cruz was. I mean, I don't give Rolly Romero, I don't give Rolly Romero any chance whatsoever. I just don't. I don't. Now, I've heard some people basically say that they believe that maybe Gervonta Tank Davis, maybe, he may re-injure his hand. Let's just say, first of all, if you have to make the point all in all that the only way that Rolly Romero can win this fight is that Gervonta Tank Davis or the fighter opposing to him is going to injure his hand, that basically tells you that the fight is trash. It is what it is. That basically tells you that this is not really that competitive whatsoever. But when it comes down to it, like I said, I even if Gervonta Tank Davis somehow does injure his hand, I still don't know if I would give Rolly Romero that much of a chance. It would give him more of a chance, of course, and because he hits so hard, but his defense is so poor, and on top of that, his head movement is so poor. Gervonta Tank Davis, to be honest with you, he could probably re-injure, I'm guessing it was the left hand in that fight, he could probably re-injure his left hand because he's a southpaw and still completely dominate the fight or clearly win the fight. Rolly Romero is he's so raw with his skill set. He has no skills whatsoever, at least none compared to a Gervonta Tank Davis. It just is what it is.
He's a lot bigger guy than Isaac Cruz, and if Gervonta Davis does not have the ability to fight with two hands against Rolly Romero, Rolly Romero, please forgive me for mispronouncing his name, Rolly Romero, that could be a different situation altogether because Rolly Romero is going to be going in there reckless. He is going to be throwing punches from all kinds.
That's right. He is going to be going in there reckless. He's going to be going in there reckless with his hands down, hands swinging wide when it comes down to it, with horrible footwork. Gervonta Tank Davis, he could possibly injure both hands in this fight and somehow still pull out of it. I mean, shit.
Angles. He definitely is a bigger puncher.
And of course, that's me exaggerating a little bit on my part. But what I'm basically saying is this: unless Rolly Romero literally lands the touch of God, or unless he literally lands overall the perfect punch, I don't see how he beats Gervonta Tank Davis. I just don't see it.
Than Isaac Cruz, and so there is definitely a chance that if you have to spend half of the fight fighting with one hand, that Rolly Romero could beat Gervonta Tank Davis. In the minds of a lot of people. Notice how I did that, what you call a pregnant pause, and said he can beat him in the minds of a lot of different, of other people. Now, so
well, like I said, most people don't really know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to boxing anyway. Most people really don't know what the hell they're talking about no matter what subject it is. So it is what it is. And most people don't really know shit about boxing. I can tell by Rolly Romero, he has no chance against Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, to be fair, the last time that I completely counted out a boxer, last time was when Jeff Horn fought Manny Pacquiao. And Jeff Horn, of course, when it came down to it, he ended up actually making that fight very, very competitive. To be honest with you, I actually think that is a part of the reason why Jeff Horn was able to pull off that victory, or at least make the fight very competitive, is because I think Manny Pacquiao actually went in there and did not think that he was going to offer a whole lot of problems to him. And I think that's a part of the reason why he lost that fight. But it is what it is. Do I think the same thing is going to happen here? No, I don't. Because at least Jeff Horn, he had certain things over Manny Pacquiao, like clear size. He was clearly bigger and naturally thicker than Manny Pacquiao. And I think that he had enough power and even enough skills to somewhat keep Manny Pacquiao off of him. Rolly Romero, his feet is horrible. When it comes down to it, the feet are horrible. The defense is nowhere to be found when it comes down to it. The head movement isn't there really. I mean, what is he going to do against Gervonta Tank Davis? Even if he does underestimate him, Gervonta Tank Davis can adapt very well. And more than likely, Gervonta Tank Davis, he's pretty much going to tee off on him. But we'll see what happens.
Example, the Gary Russell Jr. fight. And certain people are not going to like it in the comment section. I do not particularly care. You can also look at the Guillermo Rigondeaux Casemiro fight, where you have a fighter and Gervonta Tank Davis versus Isaac Cruz, where you have a fighter that is not throwing a lot of punches, and you have an aggressive fighter that is coming at you, winging away, throwing a lot of punches that may land on your gloves, may land on your...
Let me give you a lot of credit, sir, for not making the same excuses that I heard a lot of these other channels make, about that Mark Magsayo versus Gary Russell Jr. fight. This is why I like Fannon's channel, even though I don't necessarily always agree with what he has to say. I certainly would recommend Fannon's channel over a certain amount of these other channels that I tend to review. But it just is what it is. But I scored the fight Mark Magsayo versus Gary Russell Jr. the other day, and I think that the scorecards pretty much got it perfect. I had Mr. Mark Magsayo winning that fight 7 rounds to 5. You could have even scored it 8 rounds to 4. Now Gary, he was certainly winning certain rounds, but you can't claim that fight was a robbery. It was just way too competitive. And at the end of the day, Gary Russell Jr., do I think that he did have an injury? Yes, I do. All right, I think that he had an injury more than likely rewatching it, but at the end of the day, Mark Magsayo, that's not his problem. It is what it is. Whether a fighter has an injury or not, it is what it is. Mark Magsayo ended up getting the, fight. He ended up getting the victory. Would I like to see a rematch between the two? I would like to see a rematch, but that's not really my call. That's up to the Filipino fighter, of course, Mr. Mark Magsayo. And if I had to guess, just because of how troubling Gary Russell Jr. was for him in that fight, I'd highly doubt that he's more than likely going to take a rematch. I think he's going to move on to bigger, broader things, but we'll see what happens.
Arms, you are going to have a lot of people talking about that guy won rounds where he did not necessarily win rounds. For me, the way that Rolly Romero performed against Isaac Cruz makes me even more confident that he is going to be able to beat Rolly Romero, because Rolly Romero...
You mean Gervonta Tank Davis?
...is not going to be able to hit Gervonta Davis with a clean punch if he was using a super soaker in the ring. Okay?
I agree with you.
I don't think he could hit him with water balloons. I don't think he could hit him with a water gun. I don't think he could hit him with a hose. That's how slow and predictable and
Thank you. I agree, sir. Basically, you have the same exact opinion that I do. This is a bullshit fight. It just is what it is. And I know a bullshit fight when I see one. A lot of people overall will take a look at a fight and they'll basically say, oh, well, this is a real competitive fight. Canelo versus Caleb Plant, in my opinion, was a somewhat competitive fight. Now, there's different levels to competitive fights. When you take a look at Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano, for example, that's a 50-50 fight that can go either way. However, if Jermell Charlo or Brian Castano, let's say, for example, if they were to face Canelo Alvarez, then all of a sudden it wouldn't be a 50-50 fight, because even though that's a 50-50 fight for them, Canelo's on a whole nother level compared to those guys. So it just is what it is. Listen, when I take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis, whether people want to admit it or not, he is one of the top 10, in my opinion, most talented boxers in the world. It just is what it is. And when I take a look at Rolly Romero, I don't even know if he would be within my top 100. It is what it is.
That Rolly Romero is, and how good a defender and how shifty a defender Gervonta Tank Davis is. But do not rule out, and also you can rule out the robbery. In this particular instant, because Gervonta Davis is the cash cow, and Gervonta Davis is going to be the guy that is bringing the majority of the fans to the fight, you're not going to hear a lot of screaming for Rolly Romero every time Rolly Romero throws a punch that may land or may not land.
There may be a certain amount of screaming when it comes at him, because Gervonta Tank Davis, he's a very, very big star. And what that means, like I said, you're going to get a lot of people that love you, but there's a certain amount of people that say, you know what, I wonder when that throne is going to come to an end. Tom Brady recently just lost in the divisional round, and it was the biggest news of the weekend. Overall, that he ended up losing overall to the LA Rams, and people all know are basically shitting all over them. So that really shows you that a lot of people, they take a lot of energy, or they put a lot of energy overall, into big, big stars, whether they love them or hate them. So Gervonta Tank Davis, whether he wins or loses in this fight, there's going to be cheers going back and forth, in my opinion.
Versus when you have, a fight, where a fighter, and I think one of the good examples of that for me, so a lot of people don't agree with it, but I'm telling you, this is the phenomenon that you see, where you have a guy like in the Manny Pacquiao versus Tim Bradley fight, the first fight, for example. There were every time Manny Pacquiao threw a punch, people would cheer when Manny Pacquiao threw the punch as if the punch landed. But once you pause the fight, you look back and you're like, hold on, those punches didn't land. Tim Bradley was slipping those punches. It's already too late. The judges can be affected by the screen.
I somewhat agree with you, but I recently watched that Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley first fight. You can argue that maybe Manny Pacquiao did not land as many punches, or that whenever the crowd cheers, That doesn't always mean that the punches land. But Manny Pacquiao, in my opinion, he clearly landed more than Timothy Bradley, and he was clearly busier. That's why I never understand the narrative when a certain amount of people say, "Oh, that fight was competitive." No, it wasn't really that competitive at all. Every time that I've watched that fight, I've scored at the same 8 rounds to 4 for Manny Pacquiao. That was one of the worst robberies that I've personally ever seen in my life.
Screams of the crowd.
Now, the Jeff Horn fight, for example, in my opinion, that was not necessarily something that I would call a robbery. But, even though Jeff Horn, do I think that he got somewhat of the home field advantage? Yes, but, it is what it is.
Surrounds them. And it's only the really disciplined judge that is going to not second guess himself when he hears a bunch of people cheering for somebody that is being really busy and throwing a ton of punches. You saw the same thing in Floyd Mayweather Jr. fights versus Marcus Maidana. From my perspective, where I was sitting, I didn't think Marcus Maidana was doing much of anything against Floyd Mayweather Jr. other than throwing a bunch of wild punches that would land.
He actually was landing quite a bit against Floyd Mayweather Jr. That was one of the fights, all in all, and I think Floyd might have underestimated his ability a little bit. Maidana went into both of those fights, and he actually was able to give Floyd Mayweather Jr. some good work. Now, that's not me saying that I necessarily believe that Maidana won either of those fights. I'd have to rewatch the first fight. The first fight that when I watched it several years ago, it looked very, very close, but I would have to rewatch it because the last time I watched that fight was like 8 years ago. But when it comes down to it, like I said, or, about probably, how long ago that fight happened now? I believe actually it happened now about 8 years ago because I think it happened all the way back in 2014. The last time I probably watched it was about 7, 6 years ago, I guess. But when it comes down to it, Maidana was actually able to give Floyd Mayweather Jr. a lot of problems. This is not even on the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Maidana level. It is what it is.
And on his glove, they would catch on his gloves, catch on his elbows, something like that. But the rest of the punches, not saying it didn't land in.
You know what this fight is on the level of, in my opinion? This is exactly like the Canelo Alvarez versus Rocky Fielding fight. Where if Rocky Fielding were to beat Canelo Alvarez, I would literally give him a 0.0000000.1% chance. That's about it.
Punches. I don't want to exaggerate. Some of those punches got through, but not anywhere near what the people were saying right about it. And if you look at the punch output, Floyd Mayweather Jr. was punching Marcus Maidana, throwing a lot less punches than Marcus Maidana, but was landing them. And the CompuBox and all that stuff gets thrown off when you have a fighter that's throwing a lot of punches. Because just by the very virtue of them throwing a lot of punches.
Right, but just talking about this fight, is Rolly Romero really going to throw a lot more than Gervonta Tank Davis? I'm not so sure about that.
Just some of those things are going to land up and around the guy's head, and it's more likely that those are going to be scoring blows if that happens on a continual basis. So, absolutely, if Gervonta Davis gets his hand injured in the fight with Rolly Romero, and it's a fresh injury, right? It's something that just...
That's literally overall how bad this fight is. And listen, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone overall who thinks that this is a decent fight. Listen, your opinion is your opinion. But when I just take a look at this fight, I don't think it's a good fight at all. It just is what it is. Like I said, when people are literally talking about, overall that, well, if Gervonta Tank Davis injures his hand, who overall talks about a fight like that? Well, yeah, if Gervonta Tank Davis maybe, fucks up one of his hands, maybe then the other guy can win. Like, that's how a fight overall is straight up dog shit. It is what it is. And no disrespect to Gervonta Tank Davis, but just like, come on, dude. Eventually you got to get in the ring then there with somebody. I mean, come on. Dude has been stepping in the ring there with just corpses.
That took place, before. And once you start getting brittle hands, if you have brittle hands and your hands start breaking and you start having problems with your hands, the chances increase that it could happen again. But Gervonta Davis is such a better fighter than Rolly Romero that
I agree. It's not even close.
Do have a hard time imagining that that's going to come into play. But anyway, that's my take on the situation. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.
But anyways, looks like that's it for this video when it comes down to it. I just thought that I would talk about that. Like I said, when I'm just talking about Mr. Rolly Romero, if that's how you pronounce his name correctly, I don't think that he has a chance against Gervonta Tank Davis. Like I said, at most, I would give him about a 5 to 10% chance. And, it just is what it is. I don't think Rolly has anything over Gervonta Tank Davis, even if he is able to hit Gervonta Tank Davis a multitude of times. He does not have more power than a Gervonta Tank Davis. It just is what it is. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later.